We also saw something else today. For the second time, there's been an unconstitutional impeachment of an innocent man, Donald Trump. This endless war against Donald Trump is really repulsive. And no, you cannot hold a trial against a private citizen or pursue a former president who's now a private citizen under the impeachment clause. That was never intended. So that is just absurd. But that's the idiocy and the insanity that's now taking place on Capitol Hill. A couple of things. Number one, Gerald Nadler. Gerald Nadler was leading the forces for impeachment again on the floor of the House, giving out time like handing out lollipops. We heard no evidence whatsoever that the president incited anything, which I'll get to in a minute. But I want to remind people about Gerald Nadler and the Democrats and a former president by the name of Clinton. On his last day in office, President Clinton acceded to Gerald Nadler's request to commute the sentences of both Linda Evans and Susan Rosenberg. Who were they? Evans, arrested with 740 pounds of dynamite intended for, among other targets, the Capitol building, had 24 years left in her 40-year sentence when Clinton pardoned her at Gerald Nadler's request. Rosenberg, arrested for weapons possession, had 42 years yet to serve on her 58-year sentence. Now, it is a sick irony to watch Gerald Nadler stand there and everybody pat him on his rather substantial head about him going forward with impeachment of an innocent man who didn't incite anything. So that's number one. Number two, high crimes and misdemeanors. This is their report, ladies and gentlemen. It's 76 pages, 26 pages of which are an appendix to news articles, to essays, to speeches by former colleagues. There's not one sliver of evidence of inciting an insurrection of any kind in this document. 50 pages, basically an op-ed. Historians are going to look at this and say, what kind of a moron wrote a document like this? Has anybody read it? No. Now, what else do we know? We know, thanks, believe it or not, to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and they don't mean it, that there were preparations in advance of this rally, in advance of the president ever going to the mall and giving a speech to attack Capitol Hill. There were militia and others who were arming up to attack the Capitol building. Now, how do we know this? We know it because the FBI knew it. We know it because the great NYPD knew it. A Virginia FBI office in Norfolk informed the Washington FBI and the Washington Department of Justice. They gave it out to the Terrorism Task Force. What do they do with this information? We don't know. We don't know. It was before the president even spoke. We know the president wasn't informed about it, so his Secret Service people weren't, and they sent him into this situation without him knowing. But here's the deal. The former head of the Capitol Police, who's been removed or resigned, he said he spoke with the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House and the Sergeant-at-Arms of the Senate, and he urged them, even before the crowd was there, to bring in the National Guard. What did they do? They did nothing. Who does the Sergeant of Arms of the House of Representatives report to? The Speaker of the House. Who does the Sergeant of Arms of the U.S. Senate report to? Mitch McConnell at the time. What did the Sergeant of Arms of the House tell Pelosi? What did the Sergeant of Arms of the Senate tell McConnell? You want to know why they're rushing this thing through? Because the president didn't incite anything. I went through his speech. I went through this phony article of impeachment. And by the way, no matter how you cut it, we have a former federal prosecutor who did almost nothing but prosecute people who incited riots. Jeffrey Scott Shapiro, writing in the Wall Street Journal, no, Trump isn't guilty of incitement. You don't believe me? Everybody loves Turley and Dershowitz. They say exactly the same thing. Now, there's several kinds of tyranny in this country, or in any country. We saw tyranny last Wednesday when there was armed individuals who attacked the Capitol building. I was sitting next to my wife, Julie, and I said to her, since when the hell do Trump supporters have tear gas masks and helmets and are pulling out hammers out of their backpacks?
No kidding.
That's not Trump supporters. He had 50 rallies all for the last 3 months. Nobody was dressed like that, so you could smell something was wrong. I went on my radio show and I said, who the hell are these people? We need to find out who they are. They were violent militia types or military types. Who the hell knows who they were? But now hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters are painted with a brush. We're supposed to now be re-indoctrinated, according to MSNBC. We're all supposed to lose our jobs. We're supposed to be on hit lists. And now we have repression by the left, by the Democrats. Their media, their social media, we can't even communicate with each other in this country. They have us all tied up. Now, who's attacking the Constitution? Nancy Pelosi has just destroyed separation of powers. By the use of the impeachment power this way, she's destroyed separation of powers. What else? Chuck Schumer wants to destroy the courts. Chuck Schumer wants to destroy the Senate. Chuck Schumer wants to destroy the Electoral College. Who's attacking the Constitution? I said, there's different types of tyrannies. They're the nut jobs who are armed up, and then there are the people in suits and ties and well-dressed. They look really good, they have perfume and cologne on, and they show up in Congress. We have a tyranny of the legislature. The American people saw two tyrannies this week. One today in the House of Representatives, and one last week outside the Capitol building. One other thing. I don't want to hear any lecture from any leftist, whether they're in the media, whether they're in politics, whether they're in entertainment, or the corporate boardrooms about violence. We conservatives, we Trump supporters, have been announcing violence from day one. You sit there and you decide if you agree with the result. You sit there and decide if you agree with the name of the organization. You're giving millions of dollars to an anarchist, Marxist, violent group called Black Lives Matter. You're painting the roads with their name. The Washington Post, even when it did this story on this pre-planning militia activity, it treated Antifa and Black Lives Matter really like they were the PTA for some school or something. You either oppose violence or you don't. You either support the Constitution and you don't. And the problem with the left is they cherry pick, which means they support nothing that's principled and righteous. Remember Nancy Pelosi? The president sends in federal law enforcement to protect a courthouse in Portland. That's part of our government under attack for 100 days. She calls them stormtroopers. Her number 2 or 3, Clyburn, calls them stormtroopers. They talk about defunding the police, that they are systemically racist. You don't hear that now. They're not calling the police in Washington systemically racist. They're not calling the FBI systemically racist. They're not saying defund federal law enforcement. You don't hear Mattis saying don't send the troops in, don't use the Insurrection Act. Well, they say we should now, and we should, and we should have before. The fact of the matter is, this country is torn apart. Why? Because they wouldn't accept the election of Donald Trump in 2016. And everything they've done to this country since has been to undermine him and undermine the people who support him. That's it.
Amen.